Mafia boss destroyed his own syndicate after realizing she was used as a pawn against him. The salt air hanging over the Brighton Haven dockyards tasted of iron and impending rain. It was 3 a.m, a time when the city held its breath. But down here, by the shipping containers, the business of the Rinaldi Syndicate never slept. Dante Rinaldi stood with his hands deep in the pockets of his cashmere overcoat. The wind whipped the hem around his legs, but he did not shiver. He watched the man kneeling on the wet pavement in front of him. The man was Salvatore, a mid-level distributor who had been skimming profits from the docks for 6 months. Salvatore was weeping, his hands clasped together in a desperate plea. "I did it for my wife," Salvatore choked out, his voice cracking. "She needed the surgery. Dante, I swear on my mother I was going to pay it back." Dante looked down at him. His expression was not angry. It was not even cruel. It was simply hollow, like a judge who had seen too many cases to be moved by tears anymore. Beside Dante stood Marco De Luca, his consigliere and oldest friend, holding a black umbrella that did little to stop the sideways drift of the mist. "You broke the first rule, Sal," Dante said, his voice low and smooth, carrying easily over the sound of the crashing waves. "Loyalty is the currency we trade in. Money is just paper. When you stole from the shipment, you did not steal from a bank. You stole from my table." "Please," Salvatore begged. "I have 2 kids. Please, Dante." Dante flinched. It was a microscopic movement, a tightening of the jaw that only Marco would have noticed. The mention of children shifted the air in the alleyway. Dante Rinaldi was a man of violence. Yes, but he was a man of a specific rigid code. Women and children were the sacred lines that were never crossed. It was what separated the Rinaldi Syndicate from the animals who ran the streets in the South. Dante sighed and crouched down so he was eye level with the traitor. "Because of your kids," Dante said quietly. "You get to leave Brighton Haven walking. But you leave tonight. You take your wife, you take your children, and you go west. If I see your face in this city again, the conversation will be much shorter." Salvatore stared at him, unable to believe his luck. "Go," Dante ordered, standing up and turning his back. As the man scrambled away into the darkness, Marco stepped closer to his boss. "You are too soft," Marco murmured, though there was no real heat in it. Royce Maddox would have put him in the foundation of a new high-rise. "We are not the Kingsland crew," Dante replied, adjusting his cufflinks. "We do not butcher fathers, but Marco, check his books again. If anyone else helped him skim, I want them brought to me. Loyalty is rotting from the inside out, and I want to cut it out before it spreads." Dante looked out at the black water. He felt the weight of the empire his father had left him, a crown of thorns that drew blood every time he moved. He was the king of this city, feared and respected, yet tonight, looking at the gray horizon, he felt nothing but a profound and isolating exhaustion. 5 miles away, the neon sign of Club Halo buzzed with an erratic hum. Inside, the bass of the music vibrated through the floorboards. Shaking the glasses on the bar, Maya Torres wiped down the mahogany counter with a rag that smelled of lemon and stale beer. Her feet ached. She had been standing for 8 hours, and before this shift, she had spent 6 hours in a lecture hall at the university, taking notes on social work theory and systemic poverty. The irony was not lost on her. She was studying how to save people from the very gutter she was currently wading through to pay her bills. She checked her watch. 2 a.m. "Hey, Maya, 2 bourbons and a vodka tonic," a waitress shouted over the music. Maya nodded, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She poured, mixed, and garnished without looking. Her mind was elsewhere. It was at the Greenleaf Rehabilitation Center on the other side of town. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She ignored it, knowing who it was. The billing department. Again. Luis, her younger brother, was 60 days clean. It was the longest streak he had managed in 2 years. But the private facility cost $4,000 a month, and the insurance had capped out weeks ago. Every extra shift, every tip, every dollar she squeezed out of her student loans went to keeping Luis in that bed, safe from the heroin that flooded Brighton Haven, drugs that, she knew, likely moved through the very city controlled by men like the ones who drank in this bar. She slapped the drinks onto the tray. "Table 4, she told the waitress. When the lights finally came up for closing time an hour later, Maya felt like a ghost. She changed out of her uniform in the cramped break room, pulling on a thick, oversized sweater and wrapping a scarf around her neck. She exited through the back door into the alley, clutching her purse tight against her side. She made it 3 steps before a shadow detached itself from the brick wall. "Maya Torres," a voice rasped. Maya froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She spun around. A man stepped into the circle of yellow light cast by the security bulb. He was tall, wearing a leather jacket that looked expensive but fit poorly. She recognized him vaguely, one of the lieutenants for the Kingsland crew, the rival outfit that controlled the South Side. "I don't have any cash on me," Maya said, her voice trembling but her chin held high. "The tips get pooled," the man laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "I don't want your tips, sweetheart. I want to show you something." He held up a glossy photograph. Maya squinted in the dim light. The air left her lungs. It was a picture of Luis. He was standing outside a warehouse she didn't recognize, shaking hands with a man who looked like he sold death for a living. "Taken 3 months ago," the man said, stepping closer. "Looks like your baby brother was moving product for us before he got clean. We have video, too. Enough to put him away for 15 years on distribution charges. Mandatory minimums are a bitch." "He's in rehab," Maya whispered, panic clawing at her throat. "He's clean. He's out of the life. He's out when we say he is out," the man sneered. Before Maya could respond, a second figure emerged from the darkness. This man was different. He wore a crisp gray suit and had the badge of a federal agent clipped to his belt, catching the light with a dull gleam. "Agent Cole Harrington," the suit said, smiling a smile that did not reach his cold, shark-like eyes. "Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives." Maya looked between the gangster and the federal agent, her mind reeling. They were standing together, comfortable, partners. "What is this?" Maya asked, stepping back until her spine hit the dumpster. "It is an opportunity," Agent Cole said smoothly. "We know you work at Club Halo. We know Dante Rinaldi likes the VIP section on Thursday nights. We've been trying to get a bug in there for a year, but he sweeps the place daily." "No," Maya said, shaking her head. "No way. I'm just a bartender." "You are a bartender with a brother who is about to be transferred from rehab to a federal penitentiary," Cole said, his voice devoid of empathy. "Unless you help us." The Kingsland lieutenant tucked the photo into Maya's pocket. "We want to know who he meets, what he says, who he shakes hands with. Agent Cole here needs the intel for his case, and I need to know when Rinaldi is weak." "You are working together," Maya realized aloud, horror dawning on her. "A Fed and a mobster." "It is called a symbiotic relationship," Cole said, checking his watch. "Here is the deal. Maya, you are our eyes and ears. You serve Rinaldi. You smile. You listen. You report back to me every night. You do that, and Luis stays in his nice warm bed at Greenleaf. You refuse, or you get caught, and I raid that rehab center tomorrow morning." Maya felt bile rise in her throat. She looked at the heavy steel door of the club, wishing she could phase through it and hide, but she thought of Luis, his smile when he got his 30-day chip, the color returning to his cheeks. "Fine," she whispered, the word tasting like ash. "Fine, I will do it." "Smart girl," the lieutenant grinned. "See you around, Maya." 2 nights later, Club Halo was at capacity. The air was thick with smoke and expensive perfume. Maya stood behind the VIP bar, her hands trembling so badly she had to grip the edge of the sink to steady them. She had seen him come in. Dante Rinaldi did not walk into a room, he occupied it. He was flanked by 4 men, but your eyes went only to him. He wore a charcoal suit that was tailored to perfection, his dark hair swept back, his face a mask of bored intelligence. He moved with a predator's grace, efficient and silent. He took the corner booth, the one with the clear view of both exits. "Maya," the floor manager hissed, Table 1 needs service. Rinaldi's table. Go. Maya took a deep breath. For Luis, she told herself. Just for Luis. She grabbed her tray and walked over. As she approached the table, the conversation among the men died down instantly. 5 pairs of eyes locked onto her. "What can I get for you, gentlemen?" she asked. Her voice was steady. She was a good actor. She had been pretending everything was fine for years. Dante looked up. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they swept over her with a terrifying intensity. He was not looking at her body. He was looking at her face, her hands, her posture. He was scanning for threats. "Sparkling water," Dante said. His voice was a rich baritone that seemed to vibrate in her chest. "With lime, and a bottle of the 18-year scotch for my associates." "Right away," Maya said. She turned to leave, but she could feel his gaze on her back. It felt like a physical weight. She returned minutes later, placing the crystal glasses down on the table with precision. She was terrified of spilling a drop. As she poured the scotch, she forced herself to listen. They were talking about shipping routes, something about Port 4 and Tuesday. She memorized it, hating herself with every syllable she stored away. "You look tired," Dante said suddenly. Maya froze, the bottle hovering over a glass. She looked at him. He was watching her, his head tilted slightly to the side. "It is a long shift, sir," she replied, keeping her face neutral. "It is not the shift," Dante observed quietly. "You have the eyes of someone who is carrying a heavy load. Make sure you do not drop it." It was a warning, or perhaps an observation, but it sent a shiver down her spine. He saw too much. Later that night, the club grew rowdier. A group of investment bankers had taken the booth next to Dante's. They were loud, drunk, and entitled. As Maya walked past with a tray of empty glasses, one of the bankers, a red-faced man with a loosened tie, shot his hand out and grabbed her wrist. "Hey, sweetheart," the man slurred, yanking her hard enough that the tray wobbled. "Why don't you smile? I bet you look pretty when you smile." "Let go of me," Maya said sharply, trying to twist her arm free. "Come on, don't be a bitch," the man sneered, his grip tightening. "I make more in an hour than you make in a year. I'm just being friendly." The music seemed to stop. A hand appeared on the banker's shoulder. It was a large hand with long, elegant fingers and scarred knuckles. It rested there lightly, but the weight of it made the banker freeze. "Let her go," Dante said. He had not shouted. He had not even stood up fully. He was leaning over the back of his booth, his face close to the banker's ear. The menace in his voice was absolute. It was the sound of a man who could end a life without raising his pulse. The banker looked up, saw Dante Rinaldi, and the color drained from his face instantly. The alcohol evaporated from his system. "Mr. Rinaldi," the banker stammered. I didn't know she was with you." "She is not with me," Dante said, his voice like grinding stones. "She is working, and in this establishment the staff are not on the menu. Apologize." "I'm sorry," the banker squeaked, releasing Maya's wrist as if it burned him. "I'm so sorry, miss. It won't happen again." Dante stared at him for 3 seconds, an eternity. "See that it does not—" He sat back down, dismissing the man entirely. Maya stood there for a heartbeat, rubbing her wrist where the red marks were forming. She looked at Dante. He was not looking at her. He was back to examining his sparkling water. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if he heard her. She hurried back to the bar, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. At 3:30 in the morning, the club was finally empty. The lights were up, revealing the scuffed floors and the dust motes dancing in the air. Maya was hauling a bag of trash toward the rear exit when she ran into him. Dante was standing in the back hallway, buttoning his overcoat. He was alone for once, his guards waiting outside by the idling cars. Maya stopped. "Mr. Rinaldi," he turned. Up close. He was even more imposing. He was taller than she realized, broad-shouldered and solid, but there was a weariness in his face that matched her own. "Your wrist," he said, nodding toward her hand. "Is it all right?" Maya looked down. There was a faint bruise forming. "It is fine. I have had worse. Hazards of the job. "It should not be a hazard," Dante said. "Men who touch women without permission are weak. I do not tolerate weakness in my vicinity." Maya let out a short, sarcastic laugh before she could stop herself. "That is a very noble code for a crime boss." She clamped her mouth shut immediately, eyes widening. She had just insulted the most dangerous man in the city. But Dante did not get angry. The corner of his mouth twitched upward in something that almost resembled a smile. "I am a businessman, Maya," he corrected her, his tone dry. "And you have a sharp tongue for a bartender. It is dangerous." "I am working on it," she said, clutching the trash bag. He took a step toward her. The hallway was narrow. Suddenly, he was very close. Maya could smell him, clean linen, tobacco, and something metallic, like gun oil. The air between them seemed to crackle with static electricity. She looked up at him, trapped in his gaze. He had beautiful eyes, she realized. Dark, but with flecks of gold in the iris. He looked at her mouth, then back up to her eyes. For a second, she thought he might touch her. Her breath hitched in her throat. Then, with deliberate slowness, he stepped back. He created distance between them, respecting the invisible line of her personal space. "Drive safe, Maya," he said softly. "The streets are not kind tonight." He pushed past her and out the back door, leaving her standing alone in the hallway, her heart racing not from fear, but from something entirely different and far more dangerous. Maya's apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. It smelled of boiled cabbage and old carpet. She locked the door behind her and threw the deadbolt. Luis was asleep on the couch, his mouth slightly open, a textbook on mechanics resting on his chest. He looked so young when he slept. He didn't look like a junkie or a criminal. He just looked like her little brother. Maya went to the kitchen table and sat down. She pulled a notepad from her purse. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably now. She uncapped a pen. Dante Rinaldi, Club Halo, Thursday. Met with 4 men, discussion of Port 4, Tuesday shipment. She stared at the words. She was a rat. She was betraying a man who had defended her, a man who had looked at her with respect, just to feed him to a wolf like Agent Cole. She felt a wave of nausea roll through her stomach. She looked over at Luis. "I am doing this for you," she whispered to the silent room. "I am protecting us." But as she tore the page out to photograph it for Cole, the guilt tightened around her chest like a vice. She wasn't just protecting her family anymore. She was destroying someone else's. In the penthouse suite of the Rinaldi Tower, the city lay spread out like a grid of glittering jewels below. Dante stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. He could still smell the cheap vanilla perfume of the club, but underneath that, he remembered the scent of rain and rosemary that clung to the bartender. "Marco," Dante said, not turning around. Marco looked up from his tablet where he was reviewing the night's receipts. "Boss?" "The bartender," Dante said. "Maya Torres." "The one with the stubborn eyes?" Marco asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "The one you almost broke a banker's arm for?" "Run a check on her," Dante said. "Full background, finances, family, associates, everything." Marco paused. "You think she is a threat?" "I think she is too smart to be pouring drinks for minimum wage," Dante said. He took a sip of the whiskey. It burned, but it didn't chase away the memory of how she had looked at him in the hallway, defiant, terrified, and magnetic all at once. "And," Dante added, his voice dropping lower, "I want to know why she looked at me like she was apologizing for something she hadn't done yet. I will have it on your desk by noon," Marco said. Dante pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He knew better than to let anyone get close. He knew the rules. But for the first time in years, the ice around his chest felt like it was beginning to crack, and that terrified him more than any federal agent or rival boss ever could. For the next 2 weeks, Dante Rinaldi became a fixture at Club Halo. He no longer sat in the VIP booth with a phalanx of guards. Instead, he took a small, round table near the edge of the bar, usually accompanied only by Marco or sitting entirely alone. He claimed it was for business, telling the manager he liked to keep an ear to the ground in his territory, but his eyes told a different story. They followed Maya. Dante watched her with the patience of a wolf waiting for winter to break. He noticed things that other men missed. He noticed that she never flirted for tips. Unlike the other bartenders who leaned over the counter to flash cleavage at the Wall Street types, Maya served drinks with a clinical, efficient grace, her movements economical and sharp. She did not smile unless she meant it, which was rare. Most of all, Dante noticed her hypervigilance. She was constantly scanning the room, her dark eyes flicking to the exits, to the bouncers, to the shadows in the corners. She moved like someone who had learned the hard way that the only person who would save her was herself. It intrigued him. In a world of people who wanted to be seen, Maya Torres was trying desperately to be invisible, and that only made him see her more clearly. Maya felt his gaze like a physical touch. It burned the back of her neck while she mixed martinis and poured drafts. Every time she glanced his way, he was there, nursing a single tumbler of sparkling water, watching her. It was terrifying. It was also, against her will, thrilling. But the thrill turned to ash in her mouth whenever her phone buzzed. On a Tuesday afternoon, Maya sat in a parked sedan 3 blocks from the university campus. The leather seats smelled of stale cigarette smoke. Agent Cole Harrington sat in the driver's seat, picking at his cuticles. "Your reports are thin, Maya," Cole said, his voice bored. Dante met with a union rep. Dante drank water. Dante looked at his phone. "This is garbage." "It is what happened," Maya said, clutching her backpack to her chest. "He does not talk business when I am within earshot. He's careful." "Then get closer," Cole snapped, turning to look at her. His eyes were flat and hard. "We need dates. We need the location of the distribution hubs. We need to know where the money is being washed. If you can get into his phone, get the numbers." "I'm just a bartender," Maya protested, her voice rising. "How am I supposed to get his phone? He never lets it out of his hand." "Figure it out," Cole said. "Or maybe I will figure out how to transfer your brother to the state penitentiary in Waycross. I hear the gangs there love fresh meat." Maya went pale. "You promised Luis would be safe." "Luis is safe as long as you are useful," Cole said. "Tighten the noose, Maya, or we will tighten it for you." The tension followed her into her shift that night. The club was rowdy, the air thick with the smell of sweat and desperation. The Kingsland crew had been testing boundaries lately, sending their foot soldiers into Rinaldi territory to provoke reactions. It happened at midnight near the pool tables. A man wearing the blue and gray colors of the Kingsland outfit, a loud, burly man named Vinny, bumped hard into a younger kid who ran numbers for Dante. "Watch it! Rinaldi trash!" Vinny shouted, shoving the kid backward. The glass in the kid's hand shattered on the floor. The music seemed to stutter. Maya saw the flash of a knife handle at Vinny's waist. Without thinking, she slammed her serving tray down on the bar and rushed around the counter. "Hey!" she yelled, stepping directly between the two men. "Not in here. Take it outside or I call the cops." Vinny looked down at her, his face flushed with drink and aggression. "Get lost, sweetheart. This does not concern you." "It concerns me if you break my furniture," Maya said, her voice shaking but her feet planted firm. Vinny sneered and raised a hand as if to shove her aside. "I would not do that," a voice said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dante Rinaldi had emerged from the shadows of his table. He did not shout. He did not run. He simply walked toward them, his hands open at his sides, his face a mask of terrifying calm. Vinny froze. His hand hovered in the air near Maya's shoulder. "Mr. Rinaldi," Vinny stammered. "You are in my house," Dante said softly. He stopped 2 feet away, placing himself so that Maya was shielded slightly by his body. "And you are threatening a woman who is simply trying to do her job. Is this how Royce teaches his dogs to behave?" "She got in the way," Vinny muttered, stepping back. "Leave," Dante ordered. He did not point. He did not gesture. It was a command that brooked no argument. "Tell Royce that if his men cannot hold their liquor, they are not welcome in Brighton Haven." Vinny swallowed hard, nodded once, and scrambled toward the door, his friends trailing behind him like chastised children. The club was silent. Dante turned to Maya. The terrifying mask vanished, replaced by a look of genuine concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," Maya breathed, her adrenaline crashing. "I am fine. I didn't want to fight." "You were brave," Dante said, "but foolish. Do not step between wolves. Maya, you might get bitten." He looked around the room, and the patrons quickly went back to their drinks, pretending they hadn't seen the boss of Brighton Haven assert his dominance. "I'm sorry for the chaos," Dante said quietly to her. "It will not happen again." When the shift ended at 3 in the morning, the rain had started, a cold, miserable drizzle that turned the city streets into mirrors. Maya pushed open the back door, pulling her coat tight, ready to make the sprint to the subway station. A sleek black sedan was idling at the curb, the rear window rolled down. "Get in," Dante said. Maya hesitated on the step. "I can take the train, Mr. Rinaldi." "The subway is 4 blocks away, and after what happened tonight, the Kingsland men will be agitated," Dante said. "The neighborhood feels off tonight. The energy is wrong. Please, allow me to see you home." It wasn't an order, but it wasn't really a request either. It was a statement of fact. Maya looked at the dark, wet street, then at the warm interior of the car. She nodded and slid into the back seat. The car was quiet, smelling of leather and rain. The driver, a silent man named Enzo, pulled away from the curb smoothly. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They watched the city blur past the rain-streaked windows. "You're studying social work," Dante said suddenly. It wasn't a question. Maya looked at him, surprised. "How did you know?" "I pay attention," Dante said. "Why social work?" Maya picked at a loose thread on her coat. "Because the system is broken. People fall through the cracks every day. I want to be the person who catches them." She paused, then added, "My parents died when I was 19. There was debt, confusion. Nobody helped us. I figured if nobody was going to help, I had to learn how to do it myself." She left out Luis. She left out the addiction, the rehab, the blackmail, but the core of it was true. Dante was silent for a block. "I understand that," he said, his voice low. "My father was a violent man. He believed that fear was the only way to command respect. He ruled this city with a hammer. When I was a boy, I used to hide in the library just to escape the noise of his house." Maya turned to look at him. In the passing streetlights, his profile looked sharp, almost statuesque, but there was a sadness in the set of his mouth. "Is that why you have rules?" Maya asked. "No women, no children." "Chaos is easy," Dante said, looking at his hands. "Violence is easy. Order is hard. I built the code because I did not want to be him. I wanted to build something that could survive without feeding on the innocent. Perhaps that makes me a hypocrite, running a syndicate with a conscience, but it is the only way I can sleep." Maya felt a pang in her chest. He was a criminal, a man who ordered violence as easily as ordering dinner. Yet he was speaking to her with a vulnerability that felt dangerous. It made him human. And if he was human, betraying him was a sin. "Here we are," the driver announced. They had arrived at her building. Dante waited for the driver to open the door, then walked Maya to the stoop of her apartment building. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and damp. Maya turned to say goodnight, fumbling for her keys. She looked up, and he was there. He was standing close, too close. He placed one hand on the doorframe above her head, leaning in slightly. He wasn't touching her, but his arm created a cage, shielding her from the street, enclosing her in his space. Maya's breath hitched. She could feel the heat radiating from him. She looked at his lips, sculpted, firm, and then up to his eyes. They were burning with an intensity that stripped her bare. He wanted her. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Dante lowered his head, inches from hers. "Maya," he whispered. She wanted to lean in. God, she wanted to lean in. She wanted to forget Cole, forget Luis, forget the wire tapping in her chest, and just be a woman standing in front of a man. But the lie was a wall between them. Maya turned her face away gently, staring at the buttons of his coat. "I can't," she whispered. "This, you and me, It would make everything too complicated. Dante froze. For a second, she thought he might be angry, but he simply exhaled, a long, slow sound. He removed his hand from the doorframe and stepped back, giving her the air she claimed she needed. "You are right," Dante said, his voice rough. "Complicated is the last thing you need." He looked at her for one last moment, his gaze lingering on her mouth, making it clear that his restraint was a choice, not a lack of desire. "Good night, Maya." He turned and walked back to his car. Maya watched the taillights disappear around the corner, her hand pressed to her chest, torn between the warmth of his nearness and the icy dread of what she was doing to him. The next morning, the reality of her situation came crashing back. Maya was walking to the subway when a black SUV pulled up alongside her. The window slid down. It wasn't Dante. It was Agent Cole. "Get in," Cole said. "I have class," Maya said, gripping her bag. "Class is canceled." Cole sneered. He made her sit in the front seat while he drove aggressively through traffic. He did not take her to a precinct. He took her to a quiet park by the river and turned off the engine. "I saw the report from your shift last night," Cole said. "You let him drive you home. You stood on your porch with him for 3 minutes. And yet, I have no new information." "He didn't say anything useful," Maya lied. "He talked about his childhood." "I don't care about his daddy issues," Cole shouted, slamming his hand on the steering wheel. Maya flinched. "I want access." "Maya, a smart girl would know how to use what she has got. You are a pretty woman. He is a man. Do the math." Maya felt sick. The insinuation hung in the air like a foul smell. "You want me to sleep with him?" "I want you to do whatever it takes to get me what I need," Cole said, leaning closer, his breath smelling of coffee and mints. "Because if you don't, you are useless to me. And useless people don't get favors. Useless people get their brothers thrown to the wolves." He unlocked the doors. "Get out, and do not disappoint me again." Maya stumbled out of the car, her knees shaking. She felt dirty, disposable. She walked for an hour, trying to clear her head, but the nightmare wasn't over. As she turned the corner near her apartment, 2 men stepped out of a doorway. They wore expensive tracksuits and heavy gold chains. Kingsland soldiers. "Hey, beautiful," one of them said, blocking her path. "Excuse me," Maya said, trying to step around them. The man grabbed her arm, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to stop her. "We saw you with Rinaldi last night, looking very cozy." "I'm just a bartender," Maya said, her voice trembling. "Sure you are." The man smiled. It was a reptile smile. "We just wanted to give you some friendly advice. Accidents happen in this city, especially to people Dante Rinaldi cares about. It would be a shame if something happened to that pretty face of yours, or maybe to that brother of yours in Greenleaf." He let go of her arm and patted her cheek, a mocking gesture of affection. "Make sure Rinaldi keeps liking you, honey. It makes things so much more interesting for us." They laughed and walked away. Maya stood on the sidewalk, the realization crashing down on her. It wasn't just Cole. The Kingsland crew wanted this too. They were trying to engineer a romance. They wanted Dante to fall for her so they could use her as a weapon against him. She was the bait in a trap she hadn't even known was being set. That night at Club Halo, Maya felt like a different person. The fear had crystallized into a cold, hard resolve. She had no choice. If she ran, Luis went to prison. If she stayed and did nothing, Luis went to prison. The only way out was through. She had to play the part. She had to seize control. When Dante arrived, looking weary and shadowed, Maya did not retreat to the far end of the bar. She checked her reflection in the mirror, smoothed her hair, and walked straight to his table. "You look like you need something stronger than water tonight," she said, her voice dropping an octave, softer and warmer than she had ever allowed it to be. Dante looked up, surprise registering in his eyes. "It has been a long day." "Let me guess," Maya said, leaning a hip against the table, allowing herself to inhabit the space near him. "Business." "Always business," Dante sighed, rubbing his temple. "Well," Maya said, a small, playful smile touching her lips, "I make an excellent old-fashioned. It is my specialty, but only for favorite customers." Dante sat back, studying her. He looked suspicious for a moment, but then the tension in his shoulders seemed to bleed away. He wanted to believe this. He wanted to believe that the woman from the stoop had changed her mind. "I would be honored," Dante said. Maya brought the drink. Instead of sliding it across the table, she set it down and lingered. She cracked a joke about the manager's terrible taste in ties, and Dante actually laughed, a rich, deep sound that transformed his face. "You should laugh more often," Maya said softly. "It suits you." She reached out and placed her hand on his forearm. It was a calculated move, a lie. But as her fingers brushed the expensive wool of his suit, she felt the muscle beneath it tense instantly. It wasn't a flinch of repulsion, it was the reaction of a man holding himself back with every ounce of his willpower. Dante went still. He looked at her hand on his arm, then up at her eyes. The air between them crackled with electricity. "Maya," he said, his voice a low rumble. Maya felt her own heart hammer against her ribs. She had meant to manipulate him, to play the role Cole and Royce wanted, but as she touched him, feeling the heat of his skin and the solid strength of him, her resolve slipped. The artifice crumbled. She wasn't just acting. She wanted to be touching him. She wanted to be the one who made him laugh. "I am just saying," she whispered, her thumb brushing against his wrist, "that maybe complicated isn't the worst thing in the world." Dante stared at her, his eyes dark and hungry, and Maya knew she had just crossed a line she could never uncross. She had baited the trap, but she had caught herself in it as well. The last customer had finally stumbled out of Club Halo at 3 a.m, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy and thick. The air smelled of cleaning solvent and stale spirits. Maya Torres wiped down the mahogany bar, her movements automatic, her mind a tangle of exhaustion and nerves. She felt him before she saw him. Dante Rinaldi did not approach the bar. He stood near the entrance to the service elevator, watching her. He had removed his tie, and the top button of his white dress shirt was undone, revealing the hollow of his throat. It was a small detail, but on a man who wore armor as a second skin, it felt shockingly intimate. "Leave the rest," Dante said, his voice carrying easily across the empty room. "The morning crew can handle the polish." Maya paused, the rag dripping in her hand. "I like to finish my shift properly, Mr. Rinaldi." "Dante," he corrected her. He walked toward her, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet of the VIP section. "And I am asking you to take a break. There is a private lounge on the roof. The air is better up there." Maya hesitated. Her chest tightened. She knew what this was. It was an invitation, but it was also an opportunity. Agent Cole Harrington would want to know what the boss of the Rinaldi Syndicate did after hours. He would want to know the layout of the private areas, but looking at Dante, at the weary line of his shoulders and the dark, guarded hope in his eyes, Maya realized she did not want to go up there for Cole. She wanted to go for herself. She wanted 5 minutes where she wasn't a spy and he wasn't a target. "Okay," she whispered, tossing the rag into the bucket. "Just for a minute." They took the private elevator in silence. When the doors slid open, the wind hit them instantly, cool and carrying the salt tang of the ocean. The rooftop lounge was small, enclosed by glass walls on 3 sides, with a terrace that looked out over the sprawling, glittering grid of Brighton Haven. Dante walked to a small crystal decanter on a side table. "Bourbon?" "Please," Maya said. He poured 2 glasses. He did not hand hers to her. He walked to the edge of the terrace and set it on the wide stone railing. Maya followed him. Below them, the city breathed. Sirens wailed in the distance, a lonely sound that emphasized their isolation. "My mother used to hate this view," Dante said suddenly. He was looking at the skyline, but his eyes seemed focused on something far away. "She grew up in the country. She said a city like this was just a machine designed to chew people up." Maya took a sip of the amber liquid. It burned pleasantly going down. Was she right? She was usually right, Dante admitted. A small, sad smile touched his lips. She volunteered at the St. Jude shelter on 4th Street. Every Sunday, She would come home smelling of bleach and vegetable soup, and she would beg my father to get out, to leave the life. She wanted me to be an architect. She wanted me to build things, not break them. Maya looked at him, surprised by the raw honesty in his voice. Why didn't you? Leave. I mean, Dante turned the glass in his hand. Because my father was who he was, and when he passed, the vacuum he left would have started a war that would have burned this whole city down. Someone had to hold the leash. Someone had to keep the wolves from eating the sheep. He looked at her then, and the intensity of his gaze made her knees weak. I am not a good man. Maya, I run a crooked empire, but I keep the drugs away from the schools. I keep the loan sharks from breaking legs over missed payments. I try to protect the neighborhood in the only way I know how. Maya felt a lump form in her throat. He sounded so burdened, so incredibly lonely. It mirrored the weight she felt every time she looked at her brother's medical bills, every time she lied to keep him safe. I understand, Maya said softly. It feels like you are the only one holding the broom, doesn't it? Like if you stop sweeping for 1 second, the mess will just bury everyone you love. Dante turned to her fully. He set his glass down on the stone rail. Is that how you feel? That you are cleaning up everyone else's mess? All my life, Maya admitted, her voice trembling. My parents, my brother. I am always the one trying to fix things that are already broken. The wind whipped a strand of dark hair across her face. Dante reached out. His movement was slow, giving her 1,000 chances to back away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed against her temple, tucking the hair behind her ear. His skin was rough, calloused from a life she could only imagine, but his touch was reverent. His hand lingered on the side of her face. His thumb grazed her cheekbone. You should not have to carry it alone, Dante murmured. The air between them seemed to vanish. Maya looked up at him, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. He was close, so close. She could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. He leaned in, but he stopped inches from her lips. He was waiting. He was the most powerful man in the city, a man who took what he wanted. But right now, he was giving her all the power. Maya made the choice. She closed her eyes and leaned forward, closing the small distance between them. Their lips met. It was not the bruising, demanding kiss she had expected. It was slow. It was a question asked and answered in the dark. Dante's mouth was warm and firm, moving against hers with a tenderness that shattered her defenses. Maya let out a shaky breath, her hands coming up to curl into the crisp fabric of his shirt. She felt the solid muscle of his chest beneath her palms. Dante made a low sound in his throat. His arm went around her waist, pulling her flush against him. It was a firm hold, possessive but careful, as if he were holding something fragile that he was terrified of breaking. The kiss deepened. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red behind her closed eyelids. Dante's other hand tangled in her hair, tilting her head back slightly. The taste of bourbon and desire was overwhelming. Maya felt herself melting against him, her body betraying her mind. For a moment, there was no Agent Cole, no Kingsland crew, no lies. There was only the heat of his body and the way his thumb was tracing, soothing, hypnotic circles at the small of her back. She wanted this. She wanted him. But then the truth pierced through the haze. She was a spy. Every second she spent in his arms was a betrayal. She was gathering intel to destroy him, and he was holding her like she was his salvation. Her body went rigid. A sharp intake of breath hissed through her teeth. Dante sensed the change instantly. He didn't tighten his grip. He loosened it. He pulled back just enough to break the kiss, though he didn't let her go. He rested his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. "Maya," he whispered, his voice rough with restraint. "If you want to stop, tell me. We stop. Right now." Maya opened her eyes. She saw the concern in his face, the absolute willingness to let her go if that was what she needed. The guilt twisted in her gut like a knife. "No," she said, her voice shaking. She couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. Just slow. Please, Dante exhaled, a sound of relief and longing. Slow, he agreed. He didn't try to kiss her deeply again. Instead, he pressed a soft, lingering kiss to the corner of her mouth, then another to her forehead. They stood there on the roof, bodies aligned, sharing warmth without crossing the line into the bedroom. It was intimate in a way that felt far more dangerous than sex. It was the kind of intimacy that built foundations. 2 hours later, Maya sat on the floor of her apartment, hugging her knees to her chest. The only light came from the glow of her laptop screen. Luis was asleep in the other room, his breathing rhythmic and heavy. Maya wiped a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. On the screen, an email draft addressed to a secure server was open. Subject, report Thursday night. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She could tell Cole everything. She could tell him about the rooftop, the layout of the penthouse elevator, the way Dante's voice broke when he talked about his mother. She could give him the psychological ammunition he needed to break Dante Rinaldi. Instead, she typed, target remained at Club Halo until 3:30, met with staff. No external associates present, no discussion of business operations, accessed private roof area, appears to use it for solitary breaks. No visible security systems on the terrace door. It was sanitized. It was dry. It left out the beating heart of the night. She hit send. Almost immediately, her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. It was Cole. This is fluff. I need something real. I need something he will never expect me to know. Passwords, safe locations, next shipment dates. You are running out of time. Maya, so is your brother. Maya threw the phone across the room. It landed on the couch cushions with a soft thud. She buried her face in her hands and let the sobs rack her body, silent and shaking, terrified that she was falling in love with the man she was forced to kill. Across the city, the Rinaldi penthouse was quiet. Dante sat in his leather armchair, staring at the unlit fireplace. Marco DeLuca stood by the wet bar, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. You have that look, Marco said, walking over and handing a glass to Dante. What look? Dante asked, taking the drink. The look you get when you're about to do something stupid, Marco said, sitting on the opposite sofa. You took the girl up to the roof. We just talked, Dante said defensively. You never just talk, Marco countered. He leaned forward, his face serious. Dante, look at me. I have known you since we were stealing hubcaps in the Navy Yard. I know you. You are falling for her. Dante didn't answer immediately. He took a sip of the scotch, letting the burn settle in his chest. She is different. Marco, she sees me. Not the suit, not the reputation. Me. That is exactly what makes her dangerous, Marco said sharply. Love makes men careless. It makes them blind. Remember Jimmy V? He fell for that waitress from the South Side. 6 months later, we found out she was feeding his schedule to the Irish mob. We buried Jimmy in a closed casket. Maya is not a rat, Dante said, his voice dropping to a growl. She works 2 jobs to pay for her family. She's terrified of violence. I saw her face tonight. Marco, she is genuine. Everyone is genuine until the check clears, Marco said, standing up. I'm just saying, be careful. You are the king, Dante, and kings do not get to have queens without starting wars. Dante watched his friend leave the room. He wanted to be angry at Marco's cynicism, but a small, cold seed of doubt had been planted in his gut. He pushed it down. He thought of the way Maya had melted into his arms, the way she had whispered slow. That wasn't a lie. It couldn't be. The week that followed was a blur of tension. Maya continued to work at the club, but the dynamic had shifted. She and Dante moved around each other like magnets, drawn together but terrified of the collision. She fed Cole scraps of information, minor meeting times, license plate numbers of low-level associates, trying to keep him satisfied without handing over the keys to the kingdom. But Cole and Royce were done waiting. On Friday night, Dante was in the back office of the club reviewing the ledger when his phone rang. It was Marco. We have a problem, Marco barked. There was the sound of sirens in the background. Dante stood up instantly. What is it? The stash house on Elm Street, Marco said. The police just kicked the doors in. A full raid. SWAT, K9S. The works. They knew exactly where the safe was hidden behind the drywall. They knew the shift change schedule for the guards. Dante's blood ran cold. The Elm Street house was small, a minor distribution point, but its location was known only to a handful of people. "Did anyone get out?" Dante asked, grabbing his jacket. "Barely," Marco said. "Salvo took a bullet in the leg, but we got him into the van. We lost about $50,000 in product and cash, but Dante, the cops didn't stumble onto this. This was a precision strike. Someone gave them the blueprints." Dante hung up the phone. He stared at the wall, his mind racing. Information. Someone was leaking information. He thought of his lieutenants. He thought of the rival bosses. And then, against his will, an image of Maya flashed in his mind. She'd been asking questions lately, innocent questions, seemingly. "Does Marco always drive the van? Do you guys ever sleep?" He shook his head, physically rejecting the thought. No. She was a civilian. She didn't know about Elm Street. She couldn't know. But the seed Marco had planted was taking root. He walked out into the main club area. The music was thumping. Maya was behind the bar, shaking a cocktail. She looked up and saw him. Her face lit up with a small, shy smile, a smile that looked like sunshine breaking through clouds. Dante stopped. He looked at her, really looked at her, searching for the deceit. He saw only exhaustion and that same magnetic pull that made his chest ache. He couldn't suspect her. Not yet. He wouldn't let himself. But as he walked toward the exit to deal with the fallout of the raid, he didn't stop to say goodnight. And Maya, watching him leave with a storm cloud over his face, felt the blood drain from her own. She knew. She knew the scraps she had given Cole, the license plates, the seemingly random times, must have been enough for them to piece together a pattern. She hadn't told them about the house, but she had given them the puzzle pieces, and they had solved it. Maya gripped the bar, her knuckles white. She had just drawn first blood, and Dante didn't even know she was the one holding the knife. The air inside the Rinaldi Syndicate headquarters had turned poisonous. What had once been a well-oiled machine of loyalty and brotherhood was now a cage of suspicion. For 3 days, Dante Rinaldi had systematically dismantled the privacy of his own inner circle. He sat behind his heavy oak desk, the surface covered in confiscated burner phones and financial ledgers. Marco stood by the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. The silence in the room was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a holding cell. "I went through Vinny's call logs," Marco said, his voice low. "Nothing. Just his bookie and his mistress. If there is a rat, Dante, they are not using a phone we know about." Dante rubbed his face with his hands. He had not slept in 30 hours. The raid on the Elm Street stash house had been too precise. The police had known exactly which wall to tear down to find the safe. They had known the shift change was at 4 in the morning. "Someone talked," Dante said, his voice like gravel. "And if it wasn't Vinny, and it wasn't Sal, then who? We are bleeding. Marco, and I am chasing ghosts." He stood up and walked to the map of Brighton Haven on the wall. He moved a red pin from the Elm Street location to the trash can. "Tighten the perimeter," Dante ordered. "No one moves without checking in. No one talks to anyone outside the family. If I see a single text message I do not recognize, that man is out. Done." "The men are on edge," Marco warned. "They feel like you are hunting them. Morale is low. Better low morale than a prison cell." Dante snapped. He looked at his watch. 7 in the evening. He needed air. He needed to be somewhere that didn't smell of fear and stale coffee. He needed to see Maya. Maya stood in the fluorescent glare of a 24-hour laundromat 3 blocks from her apartment. The air smelled of detergent and damp heat. She was folding her brother's T-shirts, her movements jerky and mechanical. When the glass door chimed, she didn't look up, assuming it was a neighbor. "Domestic?" a voice sneered. "I like it. Very wholesome." Maya froze. She looked up to see Agent Cole Harrington leaning against a row of washing machines. He looked out of place in his beige trench coat, like a stain on the linoleum. "Go away," Maya whispered, looking around. "Please, people will see you." Nobody is looking at us. Maya, Cole said, stepping closer. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and placed it on top of the warm laundry pile. Do you know what this is? Maya shook her head. It is a transfer order, Cole said. For Luis, funding for his rehab has been reviewed. The Bureau feels that taxpayer money is being wasted on a hopeless case. If I sign this, he is out on the street by noon tomorrow, and with his record, he will be in a cell by dinner. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. You cannot do that. He's doing well. He is 60 days clean. I can do whatever I want, Cole said, his voice dropping to a hiss, because you are not delivering. I am done with scraps. Maya, I am done with license plates and lunch dates. I need the big one. He leaned in, invading her space. We know Dante has a meeting coming up. A big one, something to recoup his losses from the raid. Rumor is it is happening at the Harbor Light warehouse. I need the date, I need the time, and I need the specific bay number. He hasn't told me anything about a warehouse, Maya stammered. Then find out, Cole snapped. Tonight, or Luis packs his bags. He turned and walked out, leaving Maya clutching a warm t-shirt, shivering as if she were standing in a blizzard. Maya left the laundromat 10 minutes later, her basket of clothes heavy in her arms. Her mind was a chaotic storm of panic. She had to see Dante. She had to... What? Spy on him? Beg him? She didn't know. She just knew she couldn't let Luis fall. She turned down the narrow street that led to her apartment building. It was darker here, the streetlights broken by kids throwing rocks weeks ago. She heard footsteps behind her. Heavy. Deliberate. Maya quickened her pace, her heart hammering against her ribs. Hey, sweetheart, a voice called out. She spun around. 2 men emerged from the shadows of an alleyway. They were dressed in dark hoodies, their faces obscured. She recognized the walk of the one on the left. It was the Kingsland soldier who had threatened her before. You look like you were in a hurry, the man said, grinning. Why don't you drop the basket and come talk to us? Leave me alone, Maya said, backing up. She reached into her purse for her pepper spray, but her hands were shaking too badly. Dante isn't here to save you this time. The second man laughed. He lunged forward, grabbing the laundry basket and knocking it from her hands. Clothes spilled onto the wet pavement. Maya screamed, backing into a brick wall. The man grabbed her wrist, twisting it painfully. We just want to send a message, he hissed. Tell your boyfriend. Suddenly, tires screeched. A roar of an engine tore through the quiet street. A black sedan mounted the curb, its headlights blinding them. The doors flew open before the car even fully stopped. Dante Rinaldi did not look methodical tonight. He looked like a force of nature. He sprinted from the driver's side, his coat flying behind him. Get your hands off her, Dante roared. A sound so primal it didn't sound human. The Kingsland men looked at each other. They didn't fight, they didn't pull weapons. As if following a script, they threw their hands up and bolted down the alleyway, disappearing into the darkness. Dante didn't chase them. He didn't even look at where they went. He was on Maya in a second. Wait, Dacha. Maya, he breathed, his voice ragged. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip hard, almost bruising in its intensity. His eyes were wide, scanning her face, her neck, her arms. Did they hurt you? Did they touch you? I'm okay, Maya gasped, clinging to the lapels of his coat. They scared me. Dante pulled her into him. It wasn't a gentle hug, it was a collision. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her hair. She could feel his heart pounding against her chest, a frantic, jackhammer rhythm that betrayed how terrified he had been. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry. I should have been here sooner. He pulled back, his hands cupping her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears she hadn't realized were falling. I'm not leaving you here. Not tonight. Not in this neighborhood. Dante, my laundry, Maya said weakly, looking at the clothes scattered in the mud. Leave it, Dante commanded. I will buy you new clothes. Get in the car. The ride to the Rinaldi Tower was silent. Dante drove with one hand on the wheel, his other hand resting on the console, fingers twitching as if he wanted to reach out to her but was restraining himself. When they entered the penthouse, Maya was struck once again by the cold perfection of it. The marble floors shone under the recessed lighting. The furniture was Italian leather, sleek and untouched. It was a beautiful apartment, but it felt like a museum, not a home. There were no photographs, no clutter, no signs of life. "Sit," Dante said, guiding her to a stool at the kitchen island. "You are shaking." "I'm fine," Maya lied, wrapping her arms around herself. "You are not fine," Dante said gently. He took off his coat and threw it over a chair. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing the intricate ink of a tattoo on his forearm, a compass without a north. He moved to the refrigerator. "I'm going to make food. You need to eat. Shock burns calories." Maya watched him. For a man who ran a criminal empire, he moved around the kitchen with a surprising domestic grace. He chopped garlic with precision, threw pasta into boiling water, and sautéed tomatoes. The smell of basil and olive oil soon filled the sterile space, making it feel warmer, safer. "You cook?" Maya asked, her voice small. "My mother taught me," Dante said, not looking up from the pan. "She said a man who cannot feed himself is useless. She also said that cooking is the only way to quiet a loud mind." He plated the pasta and set it before her, but he didn't move away. He leaned against the counter opposite her, watching her eat. "Do you bring many people here?" Maya asked, twirling a forkful of spaghetti. "No," Dante said. "No one, not even Marco, stays the night. This place, it is a fortress. It is lonely, but it is safe." He looked at her, his eyes softening. "I do not let people in, Maya, physically or emotionally. It is safer for them. And yet, here I am," Maya whispered. "Here you are." Dante agreed. He walked around the island. He stopped next to her stool. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt heavy, charged with the same electricity that had been on the roof, but thicker now, more urgent. "Eat," he murmured. Maya took a bite, but she was watching him. He reached out and picked up a piece of bread from the basket. Before he could eat it, Maya reached out and snatched it from his fingers. It was a small, silly thing, a moment of levity born from adrenaline. Dante blinked, surprised. Then a slow, dangerous smirk spread across his face. "Thief," he murmured. "I am starving." Maya defended herself, smiling for the first time that night. "That was mine," Dante said. He stepped forward. He stepped directly between her knees as she sat on the stool. Maya's breath hitched. Her smile faltered, replaced by a sudden intake of air. He was so close. Her knees brushed against his thighs. She could smell the soap on his skin and the scent of the rain that still clung to him. "Give it back," he teased, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "Come and get it," Maya whispered, the challenge slipping out before she could stop it. Dante didn't hesitate. He placed his hands on the counter on either side of her hips, boxing her in. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. The playfulness vanished, replaced by a raw, naked hunger. Maya reached out, her palms resting lightly on his chest. She could feel the heat radiating through his white shirt. She could feel the slow, heavy rise and fall of his breath. "Maya," he said, his voice a warning and a plea. She didn't answer. She just tilted her chin up. He closed the distance. The kiss was not like the one on the roof. That had been tentative. This was an avalanche. Dante kissed her with a desperation that shook her to her core. It was a claiming. His mouth moved against hers with a rhythmic, demanding pressure, and Maya opened to him instantly, meeting his fire with her own. She made a soft sound in her throat, and Dante groaned, a low vibration against her lips. His hand slid from the counter to her waist, then lower, cradling her hips. He pulled her forward, dragging her body until she was pressed flush against him. Maya wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, her hands tangled in his hair, gripping tight. She felt anchored by him. She felt safe in the arms of the most dangerous man in the city. Dante pressed her gently back, tilting her upper body over the edge of the marble counter. He kissed the line of her jaw, the sensitive spot beneath her ear. Maya gasped, her head falling back, exposing her throat to him. Suddenly, she stiffened. A flash of guilt. Luis, Cole, the lie, struck her like a physical blow. Dante froze. He felt the tension in her frame instantly. He pulled back. His breathing was ragged, his pupils blown wide, his lips swollen. He looked down at her, searching her face. "Maya," he whispered. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Is this what you want?" Maya looked at him. She saw the vulnerability he hid from the world. She saw a man who was willing to stop everything just to make sure she was okay. She cupped his face in her hands. Her thumbs brushed the rough shadow of his jawline. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I want this. I want you." She paused, tears pricking her eyes. Please don't make me promises you can't keep. Dante, please don't tell me everything is going to be okay if it isn't. I promise I will try," Dante said seriously. He leaned back in. This time, the kiss was slower, filled with a hungry tenderness that broke her heart. He held her close, his forehead pressed against hers, their bodies clinging together as if the world outside the penthouse windows had ceased to exist. They stayed like that for a long time, breathing each other's air, finding a fragile peace in the eye of the storm. 2 hours later, the penthouse was silent. Dante insisted on taking the couch. He had given her a t-shirt to sleep in and tucked her into his massive king-sized bed like she was precious cargo. He had kissed her forehead and closed the door, leaving her alone in the sanctuary of his room. Maya waited until the clock on the bedside table read 3 in the morning. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. She cracked the door open. In the living room, Dante was asleep on the leather sofa, one arm thrown over his eyes. Maya crept down the hallway. Her heart felt like a stone in her chest. She reached the door to his home office. She reached for the handle, expecting it to be locked. She expected a keypad, a deadbolt, something. The handle turned. It was unlocked. Maya squeezed her eyes shut for a second. He trusts me, she thought, the realization making her nauseous. He brought me into his home and he left the door open. She pushed inside. The room was dark, illuminated only by the streetlights below. She went to the desk. There were files stacked neatly. Financials, Q3, payroll, distribution routes. She could take them. She could take pictures of all of it. If she gave Cole these files, he would have everything he needed to put Dante away for life. Luis would be safe forever. She would be free. Her hand hovered over the distribution routes folder. She couldn't do it. She couldn't destroy him completely. She looked at the desk calendar. Circled in red ink was a date, Friday the 14th, written underneath in Dante's sharp, angular handwriting. Harbor Light, Bay 4, 23 o'clock. Harbor Light Warehouse. That was what Cole had asked for. Maya stared at the calendar. It was a betrayal. It was a knife in Dante's back. But it wasn't a kill shot. If she gave Cole the meeting, the feds would raid it. Dante would lose the shipment. He might get arrested. But he had lawyers. He would survive a bust. He wouldn't survive the files. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry." She memorized the date and time. Friday, 11 p.m., Bay 4. She turned and fled the room, closing the door softly behind her, leaving the damning files untouched on the desk. The next afternoon, the sky was a brilliant, deceptive blue. Agent Cole Harrington sat in the back of a black van parked by the river. Beside him sat Royce Maddox, the leader of the Kingsland crew. Royce was cleaning his fingernails with a small knife. The door opened and Maya slid in. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were rimmed with red. "Well?" Cole asked, not looking up from his tablet. "Friday," Maya said, her voice hollow. "The 14th, 11 at night, Harbor Light Warehouse, Bay 4. Cole smiled. It was a terrible, predatory thing. "Bay 4. Excellent. You have what you want," Maya said. "Now sign the transfer papers for Luis. I want him moved to a private facility in Ohio. Today." "Relax," Cole said, typing on his tablet. "It is done. Your brother is safe." Maya nodded once, opened the door, and scrambled out of the van as if it were on fire. She ran toward the subway, desperate to put distance between herself and what she had just done. Inside the van, Royce Maddox laughed. "She thinks you are going to bust him," Royce said, shaking his head. "Let her think that," Cole said, closing his tablet. "If she knew the truth, she might grow a conscience." Cole turned to Royce. We're not going to arrest him. Royce, we're going to destroy him. My men will be in place at 10, Royce said, wearing Rinaldi colors. When the shooting starts, Dante won't see cops. He will see his own men shooting back at him. He will think his lieutenants have turned. He will think the rot is inside. And he will burn it all down himself, Cole finished. A civil war inside the Syndicate. By the time the smoke clears, Dante Rinaldi will have destroyed his own empire, and we will be there to sweep up the ashes. They shared a look of triumph, two sharks circling water that was about to turn red with blood. Friday night in Brighton Haven was usually a symphony of distant traffic and ocean wind, but tonight, the industrial district was holding its breath. The fog had rolled in off the harbor, thick and gray, clinging to the rusted skeletons of the shipping cranes like wet wool. 3 black SUVs moved in a tight formation down the potholed road leading to the Harbor Light warehouse. Inside the lead vehicle, Dante Rinaldi checked his watch. 10:45. He was 15 minutes early, a habit that had kept him alive for a decade. "Eyes up," Dante said into the comm system, his voice calm. "This supplier is new. We do not know his people. If anything feels wrong, we pull out. No hesitation." "Copy that, boss," Marco replied from the passenger seat. Dante looked out the window. The warehouse loomed ahead, a massive brick structure with broken windows that stared down like dead eyes. It felt abandoned, which was standard for these meetings, but the hair on the back of Dante's neck was standing up. The shadows between the containers looked too deep. The silence felt too heavy. Above them, unseen in the darkness of the rooftops, men in dark tactical gear lay prone on the corrugated metal. They were not police. They were Kingsland shooters, mixed with a handful of corrupt federal agents who had traded their badges for envelopes of cash. Agent Cole Harrington stood on a catwalk 3 buildings away, watching through thermal binoculars. "Wait for them to exit the vehicles," Cole whispered into his radio. "I want them in the kill box. No survivors." 5 miles away, the air was sterile and smelled of antiseptic. Maya Torres stood in the waiting room of the Greenleaf Rehabilitation Center. She had come to sign the transfer papers Cole had promised, desperate to get Luis into the private van that would take him to Ohio before the raid went down. She was pacing, checking her phone. 11 o'clock. It was happening soon. Through the thin drywall of the administrator's office, she heard a voice. It was familiar. It was loud, arrogant, and careless. "Yeah, the transfer is approved," the voice said. "But don't bother sending the van yet. Wait until morning. We need to see if the sister is still useful after tonight." Maya froze. It was Agent Cole. He wasn't at the warehouse. He was here. Or at least, he had been here earlier and left a phone line open. Or perhaps... No. He was on speakerphone with the administrator. "What happens to the girl?" the administrator asked, sounding nervous. "Collateral damage," Cole's voice crackled. "We used her to flush Rinaldi into the open. Once the shooting starts, she is a loose end. If Rinaldi doesn't kill her for betraying him, Royce will clean her up. Either way, she doesn't walk away." The floor seemed to drop out from under Maya's feet. Collateral damage. She had handed Dante over to be slaughtered. She had thought it was a bust, arrests, lawyers, a seized shipment. But Cole wasn't planning an arrest. He was planning a massacre. And she wasn't saving Luis. She was just buying time before they disposed of her, too. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She turned and ran. She burst out of the clinic doors into the cool night air, fumbling for her phone. Her fingers were shaking so badly she dropped it on the pavement, cracking the screen. She snatched it up and dialed Dante's number. "Pick up," she prayed, sprinting toward her beat-up sedan. "Please, God, pick up." At the warehouse, the SUVs had come to a halt in the center of the loading bay. The headlights cut through the dusty air, illuminating a group of men standing by a stack of crates. They looked like suppliers, rough, unsmiling, armed. Dante opened his door and stepped out. The air smelled of grease and old seawater. He buttoned his jacket, scanning the perimeter. His men fanned out, hands hovering near their waistbands, inside his jacket pocket. His phone vibrated against his ribs. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Dante ignored it. Rule number 1 of a sit-down: never show distraction. His eyes were locked on the man in the center of the opposing group. "Rinaldi," the man said, nodding. "You brought the cash?" "You brought the product," Dante countered, his voice smooth. The phone buzzed again. Urgent, persistent. Dante felt a flicker of annoyance. Only a few people had this number. Marco was beside him. It had to be Maya. Why was she calling now? He pushed the thought away. Focus. "Open the crates," Dante ordered. The man smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Open them yourself!" Dante's instincts screamed. The setup was wrong. The spacing of the men was too wide. They weren't protecting the cargo. They were clearing lines of fire. "Marco," Dante said sharply, "back to the car." At that exact second, the floodlights atop the warehouse snapped on. The world turned blinding white. "Federal agents!" someone screamed from the darkness, but the shout was immediately drowned out by the roar of automatic gunfire. It wasn't a warning, it was a barrage. Bullets chewed up the asphalt around Dante's feet. The windshield of the lead SUV shattered into 1,000 diamonds. "Ambush!" Marco roared, grabbing Dante's collar and dragging him behind the engine block of the sedan. "Return fire!" Dante yelled, drawing his weapon, but there was nowhere to shoot. The fire was coming from everywhere. The rooftops, the catwalks, the shadows between the containers. It was a crossfire designed to shred anything in the center of the bay. Dante watched in horror as 2 of his youngest soldiers, boys he had sworn to protect, went down in the first volley. They didn't even have time to draw their weapons. This wasn't a raid. Police raids shouted orders. They used tear gas. This was an execution. Dante peered over the hood of the car, firing 3 controlled shots at a muzzle flash on the catwalk. He saw a man fall. But what chilled his blood wasn't the violence. It was the precision. The shooters knew exactly where his men would take cover. They were firing into the blind spots of the SUVs before Dante's team even moved there. They knew the formation. They knew the standard operating procedure. "They know us," Marco shouted over the deafening noise, reloading his clip. "Dante, they know our moves." "The side door," Dante commanded, pointing to a rusted metal door 30 yards away. "Suppressive fire. Move." It was a suicide run, but staying pinned behind the cars was a death sentence. "Go!" Dante screamed. He stood up, firing blindly at the floodlights to shatter them, plunging the bay back into semi-darkness, under the cover of the sudden shadow. He and Marco sprinted. Bullets whined past Dante's ears like angry hornets. He felt a sharp tug on his sleeve as a round passed through the fabric of his coat. Behind him, he heard a grunt of pain, but he couldn't stop. They crashed through the side door, stumbling into a narrow alleyway filled with trash. Dante didn't stop running until they were 3 blocks away, huddled in the shadow of a dumpster, chests heaving, lungs burning. He looked around. Of the 12 men he had brought, only 4 were with him. "Where are the others?" Dante asked, his voice sounding hollow in the ringing silence of his own ears. Marco shook his head, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. "Gone, Dante. They are gone." Dante leaned his head back against the brick wall. The rage that was building inside him was so hot it felt like it was melting his bones. But beneath the rage was a cold, sick realization. Someone had sold them. Not just the time, not just the place. Someone had sold them out completely. An hour later, they were in a safe house in the basement of a laundromat in Little Italy. The room was soundproofed, lined with cots and emergency medical supplies. The surviving men were tending to their wounds. The air smelled of rubbing alcohol and fear. Dante sat on a crate in the corner. He was unharmed physically, but his face was a mask of stone. He pulled his phone from his pocket. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail, all from Maya. Dante's thumb hovered over the play button. His heart, which had slowed down, began to hammer against his ribs again. He pressed the phone to his ear. "Dante." Maya's voice filled his ear. She was crying. He could hear the wind rushing past the microphone like she was running. "Dante, please listen to me. Do not go inside. It is a trap. It is not a bust. It is a hit. Cole and Royce. They are working together. They are going to kill everyone. Please, Dante, turn around. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know they would do this. Please don't die." The message ended. Dante lowered the phone slowly. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. The timing, the questions about his schedule, the sudden interest in his work, the night she had stayed over and he had found the office door unlocked. It all clicked into place with the terrible precision of a loaded gun. She was the leak. The woman with the sad eyes and the gentle hands. The woman he had cooked for. The woman he had held on his roof while he told her about his mother. "Dante?" Marco asked, stepping closer. "What is it?" Dante didn't answer. He felt a sharp, hollow ache in the center of his chest, a pain far worse than a bullet. He remembered the way her hands had shaken when she served him drinks. He remembered the fear in her eyes that he had mistaken for shyness. She had been playing him. She knew. Dante whispered. "Who?" Marco asked. "Maya," Dante said. The name tasted like poison. She knew about the warehouse. She told them. Marco's face hardened. He reached for his gun. "I will handle it." "No," Dante said. He stood up. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a cold, deadly clarity. "Bring her to me. Do not hurt her. Do not touch a hair on her head. Just bring her in. I want to hear it from her." Maya never made it back to the rehab center. She was driving down a quiet side street, tears blurring her vision. When a van swerved in front of her, cutting her off, she slammed on the brakes, her car skidding on the wet pavement before she could put the car in reverse. The back doors of the van flew open. 2 men jumped out. She recognized them. Marco's men. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She unlocked her door and stepped out, raising her hands. She knew this moment was coming. In a way, she was relieved. The lying was over. "Get in," one of the men said. His voice wasn't angry. It was just business. They put her in the back of the van. Nobody spoke to her. They drove for 20 minutes, the silence stretching out like a wire pulled tight enough to snap. When the van stopped, they led her into a building she didn't recognize. It was an old mechanic's garage, long abandoned. The windows were painted over. The only light came from a single work lamp hanging from a chain in the center of the room. Dante was waiting. He stood in the shadows beyond the circle of light. He was still wearing his coat, though it was torn at the shoulder. There was dust on his shoes. He looked like a statue carved from grief and ice. The men left, closing the heavy metal door with a clang that echoed like a cell door slamming shut. Maya stood alone in the light. She was shivering, though it wasn't cold. "Dante," she whispered. "Stop," Dante said. His voice was very quiet, very calm. It was the voice he used right before violence happened. "Do not speak unless I ask you a question." He stepped forward, the light catching the sharp angles of his face. He looked at her as if she were a stranger, as if he had never kissed her. "4 men," Dante said. "I lost 4 men tonight. Good men. Men with families, because someone told the Kingsland shooters where to stand." Maya let out a sob, covering her mouth with her hand. "How long?" Dante asked. "Dante, please." "How long?" he repeated, louder this time. "Since the beginning," Maya confessed, her voice breaking. "Since the first night you came into the club. Cole, Agent Cole. He has my brother, he has Luis." Dante's expression didn't change. "Your brother is in rehab." "Cole threatened to frame him," Maya cried, the words spilling out of her in a torrent. "He had photos. He said he would send Luis to prison for 15 years if I didn't help. He wanted intel. He wanted to know where you were. I didn't want to do it. Dante, I swear, I tried to give them nothing. I tried to give them useless things." "You gave them the warehouse," Dante said. "He was going to pull Luis's funding." Maya sobbed. "He was going to put him on the street. I thought it would just be an arrest. I thought you would lose the shipment and go to jail for a night and then be out on bail. I never knew they were going to kill you. When I heard Cole on the phone, when I realized it was a hit. I tried to warn you after you pulled the trigger," Dante said, coldly. "You warned me after the bullet was already in the air. I'm sorry." Maya wept, falling to her knees on the dirty concrete. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I never meant to fall in love with you." The silence that followed was deafening. Dante stared down at her, Love, he repeated, the word dripping with bitterness. You think this is love? Love is loyalty, Maya. Love is not selling a man to his executioners because you are scared. I was a pawn. Maya screamed, looking up at him, her face streaked with tears. To them, and to you. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to choose between my brother and you? I am just a bartender. Dante, I am nobody. And all of you, Cole, Royce, you all treated me like a piece on a board. Dante's face twisted. The mask cracked. With a roar of pure, unadulterated rage, he spun around and punched the steel support column next to him. Crack! His knuckles split. Blood bloomed instantly on his hand, dripping onto the concrete. The sound of the impact echoed through the garage. Maya flinched, curling into a ball. Dante breathed heavily, his chest heaving, his injured hand throbbing. He stared at the blood on his knuckles. My love does not erase the bodies on the ground, Dante snarled, his voice thick with emotion. You can cry, you can beg, you can tell me about your brother. But Tony is dead. Michael is dead, and their blood is on your hands as much as it is on mine. I know, Maya whispered, her forehead touching the floor. I know you can't forgive me. I don't expect you to... Dante looked at her. He looked at the small, trembling woman huddled on the floor of a dirty garage. He saw the terror in her spine. He saw the desperation that had driven her. He thought of his own father. He thought of the empire he had built, an empire of fear and money and influence, and suddenly, the rage drained out of him, leaving only a vast, terrible exhaustion. She was right. She was a pawn. Cole had used her. Royce had used her. And he had built the world that allowed men like Cole and Royce to exist. He had built a syndicate that required secrets and violence, a system where vulnerability was a death sentence. He had created the game. She was just the piece that got caught in the middle. Get up, Dante said, eh? His voice was hoarse. Maya didn't move. Get up, Maya, he said again, softer this time. She slowly pushed herself up. She stood before him, looking broken. She waited for the judgment. She waited for him to call Marco back in to finish it. Dante looked at his bleeding hand. Then he looked at her. You are right, Dante said quietly. You were used. By everyone. He walked over to a crate and sat down heavily. He didn't look like a king anymore. He looked like a man who had just watched his house burn down and realized he was the one who had left the stove on. They want a war, Dante said, staring at the wall. Cole and Royce. They want me to think my lieutenants betrayed me. They want me to tear my own organization apart, looking for rats. He looked at Maya. If I let you go, he said slowly, they will kill you. Cole said you were loose ends. Maya nodded, fresh tears spilling over. I know. Dante closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. When he opened them again, the indecision was gone. I'm not going to kill you, Maya, Dante said, and I am not going to let them kill you. Maya stared at him, unable to comprehend what he was saying. Why? Because, Dante said, standing up and walking toward the door, I'm tired of playing their game, and I am tired of being the reason people like you have to be afraid. He paused with his hand on the heavy metal door. You said I was the only one holding the broom, Dante said, his back to her. You were wrong. I am not the janitor. I am the dirt. He pushed the door open. Come with me, Dante commanded. We have a lot of work to do. What work? Maya asked, her voice trembling. Dante turned back to her. His eyes were dark, but for the first time in years, they were completely clear. We are going to burn it down, Dante said. All of it. The Rinaldi Syndicate ends tonight? The fluorescent light in the small office above the garage hummed with a dying, insect-like buzz. Dante Rinaldi sat alone in the leather swivel chair, the upholstery cracked and peeling, staring out the grime-streaked window at the distant skyline of Brighton Haven. From here, the city looked like a circuit board of amber and white lights. For 15 years, he had looked at those lights and seen a territory to be managed. He had seen neighborhoods to protect, businesses to tax, and lines to hold against the chaos of the encroaching world. He had convinced himself that the Rinaldi Syndicate was a necessary evil, a shield that kept the wolves like Royce Maddox at bay. But tonight, sitting in the dust and silence, Dante heard his mother's voice in his head. "You cannot build a house on a foundation of bones. Dante, eventually the floor will rot." He looked at his hands. They were large, capable hands, now bruised and swollen from punching the steel column. He thought of Maya huddled on the concrete floor downstairs. He thought of her terror, the way she had flinched when he moved too fast. He thought of Luis, a boy trying to get clean, used as leverage because Dante's name carried weight. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. The Syndicate was not a shield. It was a weapon, and as long as that weapon existed, someone would always try to pick it up and point it at the people he loved. Cole had used it. Royce had used it. Even Maya, in her own desperate way, had been forced to wield it. He could kill Cole. He could go to war with Royce. He could win. But then what? There would be another agent, another rival, another threat. The cycle would never end until the thing they were fighting over was gone. Dante stood up. The chair creaked. He felt a strange, terrifying lightness in his chest. He wiped the dust from his coat and walked out of the office, down the rusted metal stairs, and back onto the main floor of the garage. Maya was sitting on a wooden crate near the center of the room. She was no longer crying, but her posture was one of utter defeat. Her wrists were free, resting limp in her lap. 4 of his most loyal soldiers stood in the shadows, weapons ready, watching her with suspicion. Dante stopped at the edge of the light. "Leave us," Dante commanded. Marco, who was leaning against the wall, straightened up. "Dante, she is a liability. We cannot just leave you alone with her." "I said leave us," Dante repeated, his voice low and devoid of anger. "Wait outside the perimeter. If I am not out in 20 minutes, you can come back in." Marco hesitated, looked at Dante's face, and saw something there that made him holster his weapon. He nodded to the other men. They filed out, the heavy metal door groaning shut behind them, leaving Dante and Maya alone in the pool of yellow light. Maya did not look up. She expected a bullet. She expected him to tell her it was over. Dante walked over to her. He didn't tower over her this time. He crouched down so their eyes were level. "The door is unlocked," Dante said softly. Maya looked up, her eyes wide and rimmed with red. "What?" "If you want to walk away, you can," Dante said. "I will have Marco drive you to a motel 2 towns over. I will give you cash. You can get Luis, and you can disappear. No one will follow you. You have my word." Maya stared at him, searching for the trap. "And if I go, what happens to you?" "I stay here," Dante said, "and I finish what I started." "And if I stay?" Maya whispered. Dante looked at her, his gaze intense and unguarded. "If you stay, everything changes, because I am not going to fight Royce for control of the city. I am going to burn the throne." "I don't understand," Maya said, shaking her head. "You spent your whole life building this. Why would you tear it down?" Dante reached out. He took her hands in his blood-stained, bruised fingers wrapped gently around her smaller ones. He ran his thumbs over the back of her knuckles, a soothing, repetitive motion. "Because I cannot stand being the knife at your throat," Dante admitted, his voice hoarse. "I looked at you tonight, terrified of me, terrified of what I represent. And I hated it. I hated myself. Loving you has made me see what my power actually costs. Maya, it costs your peace. It costs your brother's safety. It costs my soul." Maya looked down at their joined hands. She saw the violence on his skin, but she felt the tenderness in his touch. "You can't just destroy it," she said. "You will go to prison. You will lose everything." "I'm not looking for redemption," Dante said, tightening his grip slightly. "I know I am going to pay for the things I have done. I just want accountability. I want a way forward where you are not a pawn in someone else's game. I want to be a man you can look at without being afraid." Maya pulled her hands free, but only to reach up and cup his face. She ran her thumb over the sharp line of his cheekbone. "You don't get to be a hero just by burning it all down, Dante," she said, her voice trembling but firm. It is going to be messy. It is going to be hard. I know, Dante said, leaning into her touch, but I do not want to be a hero. I just want to be yours. The honesty hung in the air between them, stripping away the last of the lies. Dante closed his eyes and pressed his forehead against hers. They sat there for a long moment, breathing the same air, the dusty garage fading away. I am staying, Maya whispered. Dante let out a shuddering breath. He opened his eyes and looked at her. Maya took his injured hand again. She lifted it to her lips and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to the bruised knuckles. It was a gesture of forgiveness, of acceptance, and of profound love. Dante's shoulders sagged as the weight he had been carrying for 20 years finally dropped. He pulled her into him, wrapping his arms around her waist and burying his face in the crook of her neck. Maya clung to him, her fingers threading into his hair, holding him tight. They held on to each other with a desperate strength, their hearts pounding in sync, anchoring each other against the storm that was about to break. The next 3 days were a blur of calculated destruction. Dante did not scream or shout. He worked with the cold precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. He and Maya sat at the small table in the safe house, surrounded by stacks of files that Marco had retrieved from the penthouse. Here, Dante said, sliding a thick folder across the table. This contains the ledger for the waterfront payroll. It proves Royce has been paying off the harbor master for 3 years. And this, he tapped a flash drive, contains the audio recordings from the club, including the nights Agent Cole came in to threaten you. Who do we send it to? Maya asked. Organizing the papers? Elena Ross, Dante said. She's a journalist at the Tribune. She's been trying to nail me for a decade, if she is honest. She won't bury it. Together, they packaged the evidence. Dante made calls to his bankers in the Caymans. With a few keystrokes, millions of dollars that had been sitting in offshore accounts began to move. Where is it going? Marco asked, watching Dante work from the doorway. Marco looked pale, like he was watching a ghost. St. Jude's Shelter, Dante said. Greenleaf Rehab, the community center on 5th, anonymous donations. By the time the feds freeze the assets, the money will already be in the accounts of people who need it. Marco shook his head, a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect on his face. You are really doing it. You are ending us. It is over, Marco, Dante said, not looking up. Go home to your wife. Take the cash in the safe. Get out of the city while you can. As the sun rose on the 3rd day, the Rinaldi Syndicate began to eat itself. Dante leaked false information to his own lieutenants, telling each one that another was skimming off the top. Paranoia, already high after the warehouse ambush, exploded into violence. Stash houses were emptied and torched by confused soldiers who thought they were destroying evidence before a raid. Trucks carrying contraband were rerouted to police precincts and abandoned with the keys in the ignition. It was chaos, and in the center of it, Dante and Maya moved like ghosts, staying one step ahead of the collapse. But Royce Maddox was not a fool. From his stronghold in the south, Royce watched the reports coming in. Rinaldi's operations were vanishing. The money was gone. The territory was unguarded. He's not fighting back, Royce realized, standing by his window. He's liquidating. Royce's eyes narrowed. He's burning the kingdom so I cannot take it, and he is doing it for her. He turned to his head of security. Find them. I don't care what it costs. Find the girl. Find the brother if Rinaldi wants to be a martyr. I will give him a cross to hang on. The call came at midnight. Dante and Maya were in a temporary safe apartment near the airport, packing a bag. They were supposed to leave in an hour. The journalist, Elena Ross, was publishing the story in the morning. Internal Affairs was already mobilizing based on the preliminary files Dante had sent. Dante's phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Dante answered. She screams loud for such a small thing. Royce's voice purred over the line. Dante froze. He looked across the room. Maya was gone. She had just stepped out into the hall to get ice from the machine. Maya! Dante shouted, dropping the phone and sprinting to the door. The hallway was empty. The ice bucket lay on its side, cubes melting into the carpet. A single shoe, Her sneaker was left behind. Dante picked up the phone again, his hand shaking with a lethal tremor. "If you touch her, Royce." "Come to the old terminal at Pier 9, Royce interrupted. "Alone. No Marco. No cops. Just you. You have 20 minutes. After that, I start sending pieces of her to the press." The line went dead. Dante stood in the hallway for 1 second. He didn't call for backup. He didn't call Marco. He checked the magazine of his pistol, shoved it into his waistband, and walked out the door. Pier 9 was a skeletal ruin of rusted steel and rotting wood jutting out into the black water. The wind howled through the broken roof of the main terminal building. Dante walked in through the main gates, his hands raised, his coat flapping in the wind. Under the harsh glare of industrial work lights, Royce Maddox stood on a raised platform. He was flanked by 3 gunmen. In the center of the platform, Maya and Luis were tied to chairs. Luis looked groggy, terrified. Maya was awake, a bruise blooming on her cheek, a gun pressed to her temple by one of Royce's men. "The King of Brighton Haven," Royce mocked, his voice echoing in the vast space. "Look at you. You had it all. Dante, the city was yours, and you threw it away for a bartender who sold you out." Dante stopped 10 yards away. He looked at Maya. Her eyes met his. There was terror there. Yes, but beneath it, there was an unwavering trust. She didn't look at him like he was a monster. She looked at him like he was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Let them go." "Royce," Dante said calmly, "this is between you and me. It is all between us," Royce sneered. "You think you can just donate your money and walk away? You think you can burn the throne and not get burned yourself?" "I am not walking away," Dante said. He took a step forward. "I am finishing it." "Shoot him," Royce screamed, but before the gunmen could pull their triggers, the night exploded. Sirens, dozens of them, wailed from every direction. Blue and red lights flashed through the cracks in the walls, painting the terminal in chaotic strobes. "What did you do?" Royce roared, looking around wildly. "I didn't come alone," Dante said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I brought the cavalry." The files Dante had sent to Internal Affairs had included Royce's location. The police weren't here for a bust. They were here for a war. "Federal agents, drop your weapons," a voice boomed from a megaphone outside. The distraction was all Dante needed. As Royce's men flinched, looking toward the windows, Dante moved. He didn't run away, he ran toward the gun. He vaulted onto the platform. The gunman holding Maya fired, but the shot went wide as Dante slammed into him, tackling him off the edge of the platform. Dante rolled, coming up with his weapon drawn. He fired 2 shots, dropping the second gunman. Royce scrambled backward, trying to grab Maya to use as a shield. "No!" Dante roared. He threw himself at Royce, tackling the other boss to the ground. They grappled on the dirty metal grating, fists flying. Royce was fighting for his life, but Dante was fighting for something much stronger. He was fighting for the end of it all. Dante landed a brutal right hook to Royce's jaw, then another. Royce slumped back, dazed. Dante stood up, breathing hard. He kicked Royce's gun away. He turned to Maya. He pulled a knife from his boot and slashed the ropes binding her and Luis. "Go!" Dante shouted, pulling them to their feet. "Out the back! The police will clear you!" "Dante!" Maya screamed, grabbing his arm. "Come with us!" "I can't," Dante said, looking at the doors where the SWAT team was breaching. "Someone has to answer for this. Go! Maya! Live your life!" He pushed her toward the fire escape. Maya looked back one last time, tears streaming down her face, before grabbing Luis and disappearing into the night. Moments later, the doors burst open. Agent Cole Harrington strode in, flanked by a tactical team. Looking triumphant, "Rinaldi," Cole shouted, raising his weapon. "You are under arrest!" Dante stood over the unconscious body of Royce Maddox. He dropped his gun. He raised his hands. "You are too late, Cole," Dante said, a grim smile on his face. "I have you," Cole sneered. "I have the king." "You have nothing," Dante said. "Check your email." "Agent." Cole paused, confused. "The journalist," Dante said. "She just published the audio files, the ones where you authorized the hit on the warehouse, the ones where you threatened a civilian." Cole's face went white. He lowered his gun slightly. Behind him, the team leader of the Internal Affairs Unit stepped forward, his own weapon raised, not at Dante, but at Cole. "Agent Harrington," the IA officer said, "put the weapon down. You are under arrest for conspiracy and corruption." Dante watched as Cole was handcuffed, screaming threats. He watched as they dragged Royce away. Then, an officer approached him. "Dante Rinaldi," the officer said. "Turn around." Dante turned. He felt the cold steel of the cuffs click around his wrists. He looked out the broken window at the city. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the harbor in gold. He was going to prison. He had lost his money, his power, and his freedom, but for the first time in his life, he was free. 4 years later, the heavy steel gates of the state correctional facility buzzed and slid open. Dante Rinaldi walked out. He wore a simple gray suit that hung a little loose on his frame. His hair was shorter, flecked with gray at the temples. His hands were rougher, calloused from working in the prison machine shop. He took a deep breath of the free air. It smelled of pine and rain. A small sedan was parked by the curb. The driver's door opened. Maya stood there. She looked different. Lighter. She wore a simple dress and a cardigan. Her hair was longer. Beside her stood Luis, looking healthy, holding a set of car keys. Dante stopped. He didn't know if she would come. He had told her not to wait. Maya walked toward him. She didn't run. She walked with the steady certainty of a woman who knew exactly where she belonged. She stopped in front of him. She looked at his face, tracing the lines that time and penance had etched there. "You're late," she whispered, a watery smile on her lips. "Paperwork," Dante rasped. His voice was rusty from disuse. Maya didn't say anything else. She threw her arms around his neck and pulled him down. Dante caught her, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of rosemary and rain that he had dreamed of for 1,460 days. The apartment was small. It was in a city 3 states away, a place where the name Rinaldi meant nothing. It was evening. The air was warm. Dante stood on the tiny balcony, leaning against the railing, watching the streetlights flicker on. He had a job at a local garage fixing engines. He came home with grease under his fingernails and an aching back, and he loved every minute of it. The sliding door opened. Maya stepped out. She wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Dante turned in her arms. He looked at the modest street, the noisy neighbors, the simple life they had built from the ashes. "I was thinking," Dante said, wrapping his arms around her with a gentle firmness, "that I have nothing left to burn." He looked down at her, his eyes shining with a quiet, profound peace. "Except my fear of losing you," he whispered. Maya looked up at him. Her eyes were shining. "You are not going to lose me, Dante. We're not pawns anymore." "No," Dante agreed, leaning down. "We are partners." She rose on her tiptoes and kissed him. It was a deep, slow passion that spoke of everything they had survived. The lies, the bullets, the prison walls, and the long, dark nights, their bodies pressed close in a warm, fully clothed embrace. Fingers threading into hair and along shoulders, holding on as if anchoring each other to the earth. Outside, the city hummed with ordinary life, oblivious to the former king and the spy who loved him. They stood side by side, no longer looking over their shoulders, finally at peace in the fragile, beautiful world they had created together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Dante and Maya as much as I enjoyed writing it for you. It was a roller coaster of emotions, betrayal, and redemption, wasn't it? I would love to hear from you. Please comment down below and tell me where you are listening from. Are you in the US, Europe, Asia, or somewhere else entirely? It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Mafia Romance Stories channel so you never miss an episode. I have many more passionate, realistic, and emotional stories coming your way very soon. Share your thoughts on the ending in the comments. Did Dante make the right choice? Until next time, keep reading and keep dreaming.